see what we can do in the next 14 minutes to bring perspective to what's playing out in the oil and gas sector. Kelvin Emmanuel is an energy economist. He joins us from Abuja studio. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you so much. They say brevity is the soul of wit, so we have to be quick and punchy on this one so that we can make the most out of the conversation. Nigerians are, again, crying. The gantry prices have increased given what is playing out in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Give us your interpretation of what we should be looking out for and how long we need to bear this.
Joe, thank you so much for having me. It's always a privilege to be here. So, you know, I'm not going to go back to the history of how, you know, the Prime Minister of Iran was overthrown, slaughtered because of Anglo-Iranian company that was actually seized and nationalized by the Iranian government in 1951. You know, the history, because we don't have time. But the reality on the ground today is that there is a small aperture in the Middle East called the Strait of Hormuz that borders between Iran on the upper side and then the UAE and Oman on the lower side. And that ensures that about 20.7 million to 22 million barrels of crude daily, which is about a fifth of global consumption, comes through Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Iraq, and then also Iran, into the Arabian Sea. And a lot of that crude that comes out of the Straits of Hormuz into the Arabian Sea actually goes into what is called the Malaccan Straits, which is a border between the Pacific Ocean and the Arabian Sea through the South China Sea. And it goes to feed most of the demand in Southeast Asia, Japan, South Korea, China mostly, because most of Iranian oil, about 4 million barrels of Iranian oil that is sanctioned, because, you know, Iran is sanctioned. Iran pulled out of the GCP, America pulled out of GCPOA plus E5+1 in 2016 when Trump became president because of concerns they had about nuclear enrichment of uranium, the isotopes of uranium, to form a nuclear bomb through fission. And this is being the central thrust of the fight, that Iran has sponsored Hamas, Hezbollah, and other militia organizations around the world to attack American partners in the Middle East like Israel, you know. And on the other hand, America is also playing a chessboard game, which is, you know, because America has had issues with China around rare earth metals, around trade policy. You can see when Trump became president early last year, the first thing he did was to put up tariffs against China. America is trying to cut off Chinese energy supply for cheap crude oil. So he went to Venezuela first and it's cut off a lot of that Mary and low API crude. Now he's coming to cut off the supply of crude to China from Iran. You know, so while Israel is focused on its security and its future, the US is focused on a trade war with China and Russia. Even if, you know, or unintended consequences now, crude oil price went to $117 a barrel, dropped to $84 a barrel last night. It's currently up to $92 a barrel. America has had to say that they are going to temporarily lift the sanction on Russian crude and remove that oil price cap on Russian crude. So that is what is actually, you know, making the price of crude oil to go up on the international market. So if we bring it back home to Nigeria, Nigeria is not insulated, despite the fact that Dangote built the largest refinery in Africa and the 7th largest refinery in the world today. Dangote is not insulated from the vagaries of what is happening in the international market because he pays for crude oil in US dollars. Today he's using about 18 million barrels of crude oil. You know, 5.7 million barrels comes from NNPC cargoes currently. That crude, most of that crude is actually not in Naira like it's being said because it's benchmarked at the current exchange rates. So what it simply means is that if crude oil price goes up, he's going to have to adjust his cracking margins because the price of a metric ton of PMS on the global markets flats is anywhere between $870 and $900 a barrel. If you multiply that by the current exchange rate and divide it by the number of liters you have in a metric ton of PMS, you come to anywhere around 1,150, 1,200 naira per liter. You know, so as the price of crude oil comes down, for example, because America has said that its Development Finance Corporation is going to provide guarantees for hull and machinery production, protection and indemnity, P&I, and war risk insurance, so that ships can pass through that Straits of Hormuz channel. And the fields that you've had that are shut down. So I'll give you a little more perspective on this fight.
All right.
There are 3 fields in Basra, in Iraq.
All right.
That controls about 2.7 million barrels of crude.
Mr. Emmanuel, pardon me, if we have more time, it's an important conversation. We'd really like to know if that very critical Strait of Hormuz can be regulated, as it impacts much of the oil dealers in the world. But let's bring in Dr. Billy Gillis-Harry, who is a player in the petroleum sector in the country, to speak about how this would play out. Are we looking at buying petrol for 1,500 naira per liter before this conflict abates?
Well, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be on your show. The reality is that if you look at the volatility in the price, from what we're seeing, as you know today, the Dangote refinery is a salvation for us. It's a consistent source of product, which is much more important at this time than anything. Availability of product is much more important. The pricing, like we predicted, will have risen above 1,000 naira a few days ago. Right now, we can see that the gantry has gone up to 1,175 naira. By the time you add up all the extant charges, logistics, and all of that, obviously, the price will be getting higher and higher. So yes, 1,500 is not a far-reached, play, but that should not make us to panic. It's better for us to have the product available and be able to do our businesses and get some level of our energy secured, than not having it.
All right, let's get back to Mr. Emmanuel. You were talking about, what could be done to regulate the Strait of Hormuz such that the impact on global oil price is minimal. So go ahead with that explanation, if you can do that in about 60 seconds or 90 seconds, yeah.
Bukola, so it's a very difficult situation, and because Iran has a lot of unmanned aerial vehicles or kamikaze drones, that it will take fighter jets to shoot down. They have thousands of it that can last up to 6 months. And those drones do not necessarily need to be launched from Iran, because the U.S. Navy has sunk all Iranian Navy ships. And America can't just wake up and say they want to, assume the status of Lloyd's of London and all the other P&I clubs, protection and indemnity clubs around the world that controls 90% of P&I insurance, that writes securities underwriting for cargo and crew damages, or war risk insurance. It takes time for you to put up this contract. So vessels are afraid to go through because they're afraid that those kamikaze drones will shoot down their vessels and destroy their vessels, and then they have to claim insurance. And these insurance companies have hiked their premiums by up to 4 times, which is very unusual. Their premiums are typically between 1% and 3% per annum, depending on the age and risk of the vessel. So it's going to be a difficult situation. It's an ongoing situation. But what is most worrying, the global demand of crude oil daily is 108 million barrels of crude. And as I was explaining earlier, when you have a situation where the vessels can't take crude and go, and the pipes that take crude oil from Saudi Arabia and Iraq to the Red Sea in Egypt is only about 6.8 million barrels, right? And you have 20 million barrels that comes out of this place. The rigs have to shut down. There are 2 countries, Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Saudi Arabia has a field called Gawa Field. It does about 3.8 million barrels a day. Iraq has 3 fields. You have the Majnu, you have the West Kano, and you have the Rumaila field. Yes. They control about 2.8 million barrels. When the vessels are not taking crude and going out, and there is no storage for you to put that crude, you have to shut down the rigs. If you shut down the rigs, it means that you have about 6 million barrels of crude oil that is going out of supply.
Mr. Manuel, apparently,
so if supply drops,
my apologies. Apparently, this we totally apologize to both of you because we need more time for Nigerians to really appreciate what we're dealing with historically and the roots and all of that and how it will impact us. So maybe we have to reschedule so we have a proper, because Nigerians are really not happy right now because of the deregulated sector. So justice will be done to this conversation. I can promise you that. Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel is an energy economist. Billy Grace Harris is president of PETROAN. We'll have to have this. We need to have this conversation extensively so you can express yourself better. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.